we've been talking about poetry, and in our last class we talked about the structure of poetry, how it's built. And we looked at stanzas, right? Those poetry paragraphs. Yes? Aaliyah, Allen, yes, sort of, you remember? Okay, awesome. Last time we talked about structure and those poetry paragraphs, right? And we looked at how those were built and why the author would have those contrasts. And I had you look at "Oh Captain, My Captain" by Walt Whitman. That's what we did last class. This time we're going to talk about another structure in poetry, and this one is contrast. So this one isn't going to be as obvious on the page as the stanzas, right? The stanzas are pretty obvious on the page. There's usually a white space separating them. But this is contrast. This is going to be a structure built into the poem. And you guys, I'm sure, have studied contrast. Sometimes we call it juxtaposition. Sometimes we call it irony. There's a lot of different ways to take two ideas and look at how they are different. Okay? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to watch 2 AP Daily videos. In each video, there'll be a poem, and you'll be asked to make some annotations on it, which we'll do in class. And then when we're done, I've got a poem for you to practice with on your own. Okay? Yes? Awesome. Okay, I'm assuming that that is the affirmative. Okay, so contrast is when we're wrestling and exploring ideas. And I talked about how that could be through irony or juxtaposition. So we're going to go to our first lesson. I'm so sorry, my watch is super annoying. Okay, assigning that. Yes, assign. Okay, so here we go to our AP classroom lesson. If you are in my classroom physically, you're going to want to do whatever you do so we don't get that feedback. I'm going to mute myself. I can't say words today. Okay, so see you on, or about halfway through this video, I'll pause it and we'll do an activity together.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Stabnick from Miller Place High School, which is on Long Island. I'm back with another poetry video. This time I'm going to introduce a new skill, and it's all about contrast. As always, I want to introduce what we're going to learn, and today with contrast, I want you to get this idea that contrasts are simple, but they're also pervasive. And by pervasive, I mean it's occurring when something is different from something else in close association. I think that happens all the time in our own lives, and just like our lives, poetry mimics the human experience. So because our lives are complex, because things don't often turn out the way they should, we have contrast. Poets and writers seek to capture these contrasts in their writing, often through juxtaposition, through irony. And those are some impressive fancy English words, but you can boil it down simply by looking for differences in one thing to another. So here's an example. And I'm going to give you a poem that I think is going to blow your mind. Maybe not at first, so bear with me because I'll walk you through it. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been, which bards in fealty to Apollo hold. Oft of one wide expanse had I been told, that deep-browed Homer ruled as his demesne. Yet never did I breathe its pure serene, till I heard Chapman speak out loud and bold. Then felt I like some watcher of the skies when a new planet swims into his ken, or like stout Cortez when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific, and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. All right, here's what I want you to do. We got to do some heavy lifting here because this is a challenging poem, but we can conquer that just by starting with vocabulary. There's some names mentioned in this poem. There's probably some vocab words that you're unsure of. I want you to circle every word you don't know, look it up, write down definitions, maybe annotate them directly on the poem, and I'll see you back in a couple minutes.
Okay, kiddos.
You said mute up there.
Take on my head. Okay, kiddos. So this is what you're going to do. I've got a copy of that poem up for you in Google Classroom. Let's go there. If you go in Google Classroom under classwork, you'll see contrast in poetry. It says read and annotate the 3 poems. This is one of them. So you're going to click on first looking into Chapman's Homer. It's a Kami assignment, so make sure that you open it in Kami. And then you'll be able to go through and do what he asked. He asked you to go through and mark all the words you don't know. So just grab your highlighting tool on first looking into Chapman's Homer. Okay, so let's start over. You're going to go into Google Classroom. You're going to go into classwork. And then under Unit 2, it says Contrast in Poetry. Select that assignment. In that assignment, you've got 3 poems. We are doing on first looking into Chapman's Homer. If you click that, make sure you open it in Kami, and then you will end up with this, okay? So you are to go through and mark all the words you don't know, and then you can look them up. You've got your phone next to you, I'm sure. And you can, there's a dictionary on your phone. There's the internet. You can look up these words. So that's what I expect to see. I expect to see you highlighting words you don't know and then writing down what you think the definition is in a chat box. That's what I'm grading. Did you highlight words? And in the comment box, did you say what they mean? So here's one that you probably all know, but here's traveled. And in the chat box, I'll write next to it, traveled. All right. So what do you not know? That's your assignment right now, and I'll see you back in, or we'll go back to the video in about 5 minutes. And I'm looking at the chat box in case any of you have any questions. Okay, how are we doing? Do we need more time? Okay, I'll give you guys a little bit more time. Okay, why don't you guys tell me if you had any words you couldn't find or any things you didn't understand? And let me go over those with you before we go back to the video. Nathan, you got something for me?
No.
You found everything?
Yeah.
Cool.
Like on the words.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What about you, Taylor? Yes? What's a bard? Did you get that?
Oh, that one.
Uh-huh. It's on maybe
Oh, I didn't even know that.
the fourth line, which bards in fealty to Apollo hold. Did you get fealty? You don't have to look it up.
Yeah, I got this.
Okay.
Is
Like allegiance, right?
oh yeah.
Uh-huh. Like they're connected to them, they're honoring them. A bard is just a fancy name for a poet who sings. Okay. We're going to go back and watch the video unless anybody has anything they want to type into the chat. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself. We'll go back to the video.
And if I'm trying to understand this poem, the first thing that I would annotate is that I have a speaker who has traveled. And this is literal. It says it in the first line of the poem. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold. So that's my basis. That's like my foothold. I can get in there and understand. But then by line 4, he mentions bards in fealty to Apollo hold. And it's starting to confuse me. So that's where my question mark goes, because I'm seeing contrast of traveling, but then it's mentioning bards. So I'm going to have to come back to that, and hopefully the poem will reveal more as I go along. Next thing I notice is that he's been told things. So he's traveled, he's been told about Homer, either a character in The Simpsons or the Greek poet. I'm not sure yet, so that's my other question mark that I need to answer. I think he mentions Chapman. So I'm getting a lot of names. It's starting to get slightly confusing. But line 9 is a turning point for me. And that's so often the case in sonnets because that's where our volta or our turn occurs. Because then I get some similes that I can kind of latch onto. He feels like a watcher of the skies when a new planet swims into his ken or vision. Or he feels like Cortez when he's staring at the Pacific with all his men and they're looking at each other. So both things, the similes at the bottom of the poem touch upon discovery. All right, so we got travel, we've been told about Homer, and we have discovery. So how do I make sense of this? Well, this is where our definitions come in. I know that this person's traveled a lot, seen good states, seen kingdoms, he's been around the islands, but my definitions about bards and fealty and Apollo tell me that he's traveled, not actually, but through literature, because bards are poets. So he's traveled by reading. And he's been told about Homer. But there's a difference between actually experiencing something and just being told about it. That line, yet did I never breathe its pure serene till I heard Chapman speak out loud and bold. He's never understood Homer until he read Chapman's translation of it. Okay, so he's traveled a lot through reading. He never actually read Homer, but then he picked up Chapman's version of it and it did something to him. And here's our turn. He felt like a watcher of the skies. He felt like an astronomer who's discovered a new planet. Imagine what that must be like. Or to be like Cortez with your men around you, and you're there in Darien, in Panama, and you're standing, and you can see the Pacific just stretch out for miles on miles on miles. So for him, it's not just a memorable experience. This was an epiphany, perhaps a life-changing experience for him. Maybe you remember that joy from your childhood, the first time you read Harry Potter or some other book. And this is a poem about how great art can transport us through other worlds, meeting new characters. But it's also about experience, because there's this contrast between actually doing something and being told about it. There's a difference between something that's just memorable and something that's life altering. So in this poem, we see subtle but really powerful contrasts. So what should we take away from today's lesson? Well, in my next video, I'm going to break this down even further, and I'm going to show you how contrast exists in words, in ideas, and in structure. But today, I want you to remember these two key ideas. Contrasts are part of the human experience, and so often, great poetry captures those contrasts through complexity. And then the second thing is, figurative language can make those contrasts more vivid, more powerful. I felt like with this poem, I didn't truly get it till I got to that second half, and those similes helped me understand it so much better. I thank you for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Be well, my friends. Hey everyone, I'm Brian Stabnick.
Okay, so I hope you guys were able to see the contrast between him before and him after reading Chapman's translation of Homer. And Homer's the guy who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, you know, the Trojan War stories. He was a Greek poet. Okay, so that's one poem we're going to look at. We're going to do this again, looking at another poem, and keep that idea of contrast in mind. A struggle between two things, a difference between two things, and in this case, it was who he was before and who he was after reading this work. And I hope you guys have had a moment like that in your own lives. Gosh, as an English teacher, I wish it was a book that gave you that moment, but it might have been a song, you know, who you were before you heard this song, and then after this song, when like, man, that song just really spoke to you, and like you got something after listening to it. Music's really powerful that way. But maybe there was a book that did the same thing for you. I just look at the world differently now. Okay, but I digress. We're going to go back to the video. So I will mute myself and we're going to start the second video. So stick with me.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Stabnick, AP English Literature and Composition teacher from Miller Place High School in New York, and I'm back with another video, and we're going to go a little bit further in our understanding of contrast. Now, if you're with me from my last video, I introduced this concept, I gave you a definition of it, and then we applied it to a poem to see how poets work with contrast within a poem. And we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to go, as I said, a little bit deeper and maybe work with a little bit more of a challenging poem to see if we can take those skills we introduced in the last video and put them into practice, but understand it in a much more thorough way. So the things that we're going to learn today, well, number one, why poets use wordplay for contrast. That's one thing that we're going to focus on. The second thing is we're going to look at the structure of sonnets and see how, in a way, they lend themselves naturally to contrast, because there's going to be a turn in so many sonnets, and it usually occurs at line 9. And then the third thing is, as we're picking up on these contrasts, of course, it's not just about identifying them and seeing that they're there, it's then making inferences as to why they're there. So when we talk about contrast, here's how I want to go a little bit further than what we did the last time. I want to give you 3 ways that you can look at contrast. These aren't the only 3 ways, but I think they're a great foundation to understanding how it may exist within a poem. And the first thing that you may see is there's going to be a contrast within words. Now, in my last video, I talked about how contrasts are simply when something is strikingly different from something else and is placed in juxtaposition or close association. So sometimes you'll see that with the words. It'll stand out where from one line to the next, there's a striking juxtaposition of those words. Sometimes it's in ideas, where a poem may start off by talking about one idea and then develop a contrasting idea to show some type of difference. And then finally, it could occur in structure. And you may see this from one stanza to the next. The poem that I have for you today is a timeless poem. It does all 3 of these things. So let's take a look at an example. It is The World is Too Much With Us. It's by William Wordsworth. I'll give you a quick reading. I'll give you a quick activity to do. I'll allow you to hit pause and work your way through that activity. And then I'll see you on the back end, where we can then go through the poem and pick up on those contrasts and make inferences. The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending. We lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. The sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. All right, so if that's our poem, here's the 2 things that I want you to do. Number 1, I said this is a challenging poem. I think it presents some challenging vocabulary. So the first thing is simply circle, highlight, underline the words that you don't know, and maybe even the names, because there's some references to some mythological figures. So definitions, number 1, I want to have a baseline of what this poem is saying. And then number 2, just see if you could spot some contrasts. Like, I think a good thing to think about is this poem is showing me one thing, but it's also contrasting it with something else. So hit pause, take care of those 2 small activities, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay. Sorry. I meant to warn you. Okay. So if we go back into Google Classroom, you'll find this poem there too. So you're going to do the same thing you did last time. You're going to look up the words, and you're also looking for these contrasts in there. And we're going to talk about what you found before we go back to the video. Okay? So if you go back into Google Classroom and you go into classwork, you'll see The World is Too Much With Us, and that's the poem you're going to pull up on Cami.
You want to turn it in?
No, you're going to turn them all 3 in together. I would. Or you can turn it in. You can go ahead and turn it in if you're done. I'm so sorry. Taylor was asking if she should turn it in, and I say yes. If you've done your annotations, you can turn it in. The next one is The World is Too Much With Us, which looks like this. It is exactly what you just read in the video. So go through. It's a sonnet, so it's only 14 lines. Okay? Go through, mark your words, see if you can mark your contrast, and then we'll talk. Oh my gosh, y'all, I'm so stupid. Y'all, there's a dictionary in Cami. Yes, yes, there is. Y'all, look at my Cami page. It's the second one down, it's dictionary. So if you don't know what sorted means, you highlight that, you click dictionary, or you hit dictionary and then you click sorted, and it tells you. It tells you. That's so cool.
Do we have to highlight it?
Yeah, no, I don't know. That just seems like more work. Look up the words you don't know, and if you think you won't remember them, write them down, but definitely do the contrast. That's what I just highlighted on mine. So I did all the stuff I saw as a contrast, right? But if you don't know sorted, you can look that up. Or Boone. Okay, but I don't want you to just copy my annotation, so I'm going to switch back over here.
What do you mean, contrast? Like,
How things are different. Okay, I'll go back to mine for just 1
are we
second.
comparing both of the poems?
No, only in this poem, what things are different. Look at the first line. The world is too much with us late and soon. That's a contrast of time.
Oh, late.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Getting and spending. That's a contrast.
Oh, I get it.
Okay, so if you're out there, you don't have to write the definitions to the side, but you should look up the words you don't know. Definitely mark the contrast. If anybody's out there in the virtual world and is listening, I can never tell if you guys are like listening when you're not here, or if you're like, you have your computer open, but you're like watching TV and have your phone out.
No, in the beginning, when we first started out, we knocked out.
Yeah, like you turn it on to get your attendance, but then you're not really doing the work of class. That's a bad idea, but I get it.
I try not to.
But like, if you're at all like my daughter, who I'm calling up again, she does class while sitting on her bed, and then there's the pillow, and it's just right there, and it's her bed, and it's comfy, and
I try to sit at the table. But
I mean, that's a better way to do it to stay awake. But I mean, like, there's no hope if you're studying in your bed. You're taking a nap. Yeah, coming to school is helpful. It's just, I mean, you know, it's hard. I don't blame you, but we still have to learn our skills, right? Okay, so make sure you're marking those contrasts. I'm going to give you guys another minute, and then we're going to go back to our video, because there's a third poem that I want us to do.
I only seen one.
You've seen two. This is the second poem, Taylor, so you've at least seen two.
I'm talking about the contrast.
Oh, well, no, there's like 5 at least.
I only see two.
What? You saw the 2 I gave you, right?
Yeah, no.
You gave us 2?
I did.
I'm 2, I'm not that.
Okay, so what is the sleeping flowers? Look at the line above it.
The wind that will howl, that will be howling.
So,
That's one.
well, you tell me, what is howling?
A calling.
Huh?
A calling like wolves.
Like wolves, is that quiet and peaceful?
No.
Okay. What about-
Howling and sleeping?
Howling and sleeping, howling at all hours, peacefully sleeping. Those are different. Okay, you don't have to look up the word for me.
Oh! She just said that. Well, still, I don't know if he's working.
Yeah, you can do it if you want, but you've got the dictionary there.
The world is too much with the like.
Okay, wait, you just read a contract.
Oh, look, getting his finger, right?
Yes, girl, yes, yes. Valerie, how are you doing? Okay, so I hope you guys were able to see some contrasts in there. Let's talk for a second about the poem. What is going on with this poem? What do you think he means that the world is too much with us?
I'm thinking of maybe we're doing.
Well, what?
When you say the world is too much with us,
Uh-huh.
no.
Okay. What are some of the contrasts you saw? And my friends online, you can put these in the chat. What are some of the contrasts you saw?
Getting and spending out at all hours and sleeping about.
So Taylor's put out two. There's getting and spending. That's a contrast in what you do with money. Sometimes you get money, sometimes you spend money. And then there's the contrast she talked about with the flowers. They're peacefully sleeping, but sometimes the winds are howling all the time. Are those two things, I mean, you can see that those two things are part of our world, right? Okay. What other contrasts?
Late and soon. Did you already say that?
Late and soon, right? The world is with us. Late and soon. Something that's past and something that's about to happen. So when I look at this, I see that the world is always with us. It was with us before, it'll be with us soon. It's with us when we get stuff, it's with us when we spend stuff. The world sometimes keeps us up all night, and the world sometimes is peaceful. And then if we look down here on line 9,
So we basically talking about how life kind of just goes on.
so Nathan's saying, is he talking about how life goes on? Yeah, he is. He's for sure talking about life and everything that it is. And Nathan, let me ask you, is there escape from it? Can you get away from this?
Not really. You can't really escape the world because that is your reality.
You can't. You can't escape the world because the world is too much with you.
Yeah.
It's always with you right there. And look what he's looking out, standing on a pleasant lee, which is like a hill, I think. And he's saying that I see things that might make me less sad, right? That might be a little less of our man-made world and a little more of the natural world. And that might be his escape. Okay? All right. He's just overwhelmed with the world. Don't you guys feel like that? You drive home in traffic, it's loud, you've got homework, your friends or boss are calling you on your phone all the time, and you're like, can I just get a minute? Well, sometimes it's me. Sometimes, and I'm like, I need a break, and you just want to go away for a day. Hide your phone in your car, maybe. That's how you feel about school, right? It's just always there, always with you. You just need a break. So Whitman felt the same thing 150 years ago. Oh. Huh? Yes. Okay. Are we ready to go back to the video? I am. So I'm going to mute myself. Here we go.
Okay, we're back, and I'm going to walk you through some of the contrast that I noticed, and I saw it from the very first line. So if we look at the 14 lines of this poem, right from the beginning, there's this idea that the world is too much with us. And I understand us to mean humanity, with people. And so within the first 4 lines, I see a lot of references to nature. Actually, I see that in the first 8 lines. So I think a big idea within this poem is the natural world versus humanity. That may be the most dominant idea of this poem, especially in the early half of it. But then I see words like sordid, and I know sordid is something wretched, but I know a boon is a benefit. So I see this contrast within words right there, and that's an oxymoron, 2 words placed near each other for a specific comparison. I also see toward the bottom of the word, or the bottom of the poem, the word pleasant, yet in the next line it says forlorn, so pleasant versus sadness. So I see contrasts within words in this poem. And then finally, line 9, it moves us not. And then it turns right there because it's no longer about describing the world that this person sees. It's about what this person would rather be. So I want to pause there about the structure. I think this is a great turning point in this poem because the beginning, the first 8 lines, establishes how we are getting and spending. And that's not really our power as people. And if we look at the natural world, little we see in it that we're a part of. The poet's saying, and the speaker is saying, in a way, we've given our hearts away with all this getting and spending. And sure, there's been a benefit to it. There's been some boon, but at the same time, it's kind of wretched. He notices the sea, he notices the winds, the flowers, but he says, for all this, we're out of tune with it. And here's where the shift occurs, and here's where our great contrast is, because he's offering us a glimpse of what could be. He says, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasantly, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. He's saying, I know it's kind of silly to believe in paganism, a god of the sea, a god of the wind, a god of the land, but at least it would have a connection to nature. And it wouldn't make him so sad to stand there almost all alone, realizing how out of touch humanity has become with the modern world. Now, this may seem like it's a poem written in the past 15, 20 years about our increased technology. It was actually written in the 1800s at the rise of the Industrial Revolution. It's a romantic poem. And the Romantics wanted to get us to think about our connection to the world and how, with rapid change, we lose part of that humanity. Now, that's not what I want you to take away from the poem, even though that is a great thematic message. I want you to think about contrasts. So contrasts are a chance to explore tensions within an idea. And I think great poets do this all the time. They don't see things as flat and two-dimensional and as simple. They really see the dimensions to everything. And in this poem, we see a speaker really wrestling with not only his place or her place in the world, but also humanity's place. And this person acknowledges that there have been some great benefits due to technology and improvements in the way we live. But at the same time, we've lost touch with certain things, and in a way that makes the speaker sad. And I did that by looking at some of the words within the poem. I did that by looking at some of the ideas within the poem. And I also looked at the structure and how the sonnet itself, with that line 9 often being the turn of the poem, shifts from one idea to the next. So keep those things in mind as you read poems, not just sonnets. Look for those contrasts to pick up on how a poet is wrestling or exploring tensions within an idea. I thank you for joining me. And as always, I wish you well. Be well, my friends.
Okay, so that was 2 poems that we've looked at that have this contrast in it. We're going to look at one more poem. I'm going to let you guys do this one for your classwork, and then there's an activity you need to do with it. And this also has a contrast. So go ahead and go into your Google Classroom and pull up the 3rd poem, which is called American Sonnet. And open it up with Cami. Okay, this is a poem by Terrence Hayes, and it's about a family relationship. The name of the poem is American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. So let's read it first. Sometimes the father almost sees, looking at the son, how handsome he'd be if half his own face was made of the woman he loved. He almost sees in his boy's face an openness like a wound before it scars. Who he was long before his name was lost, the trail to his future on earth long before he arrived, to be dead and alive at the same time. A son finds his father handsome because the son can almost see how he might become superb as the scar above the wound, and because the son can see who he was long before he had a name, the trace of his future on earth long before he arrived. Okay, so that's our poem, and there is some contrast going on in here. What contrast do you guys notice just as we read it? Yeah, Nathan.
Scars.
You've got a wound and some scars, right? An open wound, which is what it starts as, versus the scar where it ends. Favors, dead or alive, good. What other contrast do you see in here? It's not letting you highlight? Why isn't it letting you highlight? Should let you highlight. Oh, mine is not letting you highlight either. Okay. Okay, so here's a contrast. We have a contrast in people. Father and son. Right? Yeah. Lost and arrived. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to annotate that poem. First, go through and look at the ideas, look at the words, things you don't know, and mark those up just like we did. And look at the contrast. Then in Google Classroom, one more thing to show you guys.
Underline. And then do the comment.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not letting you highlight, but you can underline or leave the comment box. And then if you look at American Sonnet, there's a Google Doc that you'll do. And the Google Doc says, what's the idea that the poet is wrestling with here? So it could be about, if you're going to focus on the wound, it could be an idea about getting hurt or healing. It could be about death. It could be about that father and son relationship. And then what's one way in which the poet represents the idea? What's another way? And then at the bottom, what effect does this contrast have on the reader? All right? So you're going to fill out the Google Doc, fill out the poem, and turn it in. And that's it for class today and contrast. Okay? So I'm looking for effort here. And I'll be here if you've got questions. You can get off. Oh, wait, one more thing before we get off the call. In Google Classroom, stop what you're doing for a second and look at my screen. In Google Classroom, there is an extra credit assignment. Okay? Your teachers are struggling right now. It's just tough. Teachers miss being with students, right? I know you guys are struggling too. They do, y'all. I've seen teachers in tears, both at Northside and here in the past week. It's really sad. So here's what I want you to do. If you want extra credit, I need you to reach out to a teacher who's impacted you and say thank you. Just send them an email that says, thank you, here's how you impacted my life. A teacher.
You do like a Google comment.
Huh?
Can you send it to Google?
Well, you can do it through email, but the Google comment the teacher isn't going to see, right? I don't think. But I need to know you sent it. So if you're in the teacher's class right now and you want to send them a comment, you can. I just need you to screenshot it for me so I can see it. Here's an easy way to do an email. You go to new message in your email. You open up your Outlook email. You type in the teacher's name, like say I want to send it to Miss Bradford. If I start typing in her name, it's going to come up. And then you're going to CC me. Okay? And then I get a copy of it too.
That's what I did.
Yes, Taylor has already done this. And then you just say thank you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for teaching me all about contrast and poetry. That is life-changing. I'm funny, okay? I think I'm funny. All right, whatever. But if you send them a note and CC me on it or take a screenshot of the fact that you sent it to them, I will give you extra credit. And you'll feel better because you've done something nice. And don't forget to check your email after you send it because I'm sure they're going to send you a reply. Okay, that's it. That's all of class today. So if you've got questions, stick around. And if you don't have questions, you can go do your thing.
So since I know all these words, I don't have to know definition.
You don't? No.
Okay, what was the other thing? I know was contrast.
Contrast, that's it.
That's it?
Words, contrast, and then there's another assignment on Google Classroom.